Hello there and welcome to this week's edition of The Front Page. The weather is getting warmer outside as it was at Ascot on Saturday when we had an unusually heated edition of the Shergar Cup. We should be looking back on that, on Group 1 wins for Billy Loughnane, Oisin Murphy and Ammo Racing at the Curragh, and looking back on last week's announcements regarding the British fixture list in 2026, and I promise you it will be interesting. It will be interesting because the two people with me, Lee Mottershead, are fascinating individuals. Chris Cook and Lee Mottershead. Hello, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Hello, hello. We'll start by talking about the Shergar Cup, which took place at Ascot on Saturday. It's a bit of fun, is the Shergar Cup. That's what it's there for, to help along with those 2 weeks in between Goodwood and York. And it was a bit of fun. I was there on Saturday. I'm a regular Shergar Cup attendee. I'm a fan of the Shergar Cup and I was enjoying it as usual. They had an MC, Andy Collins, who was really getting race goers excited before the first race. A DJ, Tony Perry, who was doing what DJs do around the paddock, and people appeared to be enjoying it. There was dancing around the steppings, and then the racing started and things maybe took a slightly different turn, particularly after a couple of the races, one of which Ian Williams won, a regular at the Shergar Cup, and Ian was complaining about really other people in his profession, saying it was shameful that races so valuable at Ascot weren't getting full fields. But then we had criticism from another winning trainer, or winning trainer's representative, Maureen Haggas. Her husband William won the 5th race on the card with a 3-year-old middle distance handicapper called Tentacles, ridden by French female jockey Delphine Santiago. And after that, Maureen Haggas complained about the quality of some of the riders taking part at this year's Shergar Cup and claimed that one or two maybe shouldn't be there. It was, though, a day that had plenty of people there, around 18,000 people at Ascot on Saturday, but that in itself raises question marks because the numbers have fallen across the last few years, 24,000 down to 22,000, down to 18,000, having previously been an event pre-COVID that would regularly get between 28 and 33,000 people there. So, gentlemen, lots to talk about Shergar Cup Day on Saturday. Chris, I know you're also a Shergar Cup aficionado. The front runner made that clear last week and indeed today. What was your take on this unusually controversial renewal?
Like you, I have this sort of instinct of defending the Shergar Cup, because it's such an easy target, and you feel like there's a bunch of people who criticise the Shergar Cup who actually have never ever taken any interest in it. Yeah. When you go along, as you and I have done, it's good fun. It's a bit different, and it's so easy to say, oh, we shouldn't have stuff like this. Well, if you take away the Shergar Cup, then you need to come up with some sort of major feature racing event for that particular Saturday, and there's already not quite enough quality horses to go around. So I think it works well. It sort of does the job. Bit concerning to hear about 18,000 people. You want more than that for a sort of family-based event. It has to be a mass attendance thing, Shergar Cup, or it's not going to work. Of
course, a link to that is the concert as well. It's always billed as the Shergar Cup and concert. I am not maybe the target audience. I suspect you're not as well, Liam. For the concert, they had
this is an age
Marvin
thing,
Hume, and then a DJ and someone called Perry as the headline act.
Lee Scratch Perry? No.
Just said Perry. Is that
Perry,
good?
she was in Little Mix, I believe.
Okay.
I think.
Excellent.
How big? On a scale of 1 to 10, how big a draw is Perry?
For the younger sort of audience, fairly decent. But like you said, I think the whole concept of it's supposed to be a fun day. There doesn't seem to be as much pressure as these big races you get at Ascot all the time and stuff, but 18,000 is a bit alarming from where the figures were a few years ago. So I guess in that aspect they've got to try and think of ways around that to bring that back up again. Obviously we've seen in recent weeks and so on that attendances at some of these big festivals have been going the other way and they've been improving. So they've got to kind of draw the crowds in. But it is supposed to be fun, isn't it? The whole colour of the different teams in there, different representatives around the world. It's supposed to be a lot of fun. I was there on Thursday for the media morning and they were putting up some of the fairground rides in the in the grandstand as well. I'd say it'd be a lot more of a day out for the non-race goers, kind of the first timers.
It's not a purist day, is it?
No, for the die-hard racing fans, that they're probably saving themselves for York. Goodwood's just finished as well, so it's supposed to be a day for the family, for the fun. So it's alarming that the crowd figures are going down.
And although, Chris, it's built around, if you like, a fun day, it's a day that also has 6 horse races, 6 races, 5 which worth 80 grand, 1 worth 100 grand, which is one of the points that Maureen Haggas made. So Maureen's line was that the standard of rider taking part on Saturday was, I quote, noticeably lower than usual, and say 1 or 2, she said, should not have been there. Now, we did have some high-profile jockeys. We had Hugh Bowman, Mr. Winks, won the Silver Saddle. He won a race. Carys Teeton was riding there. We had jockeys who aren't so well known, in fact probably more than ever before, who I think most racing fans would have said, who is that? But one of them, Suraj Naradu from India, he had a really good win on Fireblade in the
He
stage
was tactically aware in that race, wasn't
Very
he?
tactically
in a way
aware.
that you'd have to say most of the others were not.
Absolutely, and great vibe afterwards. He brought 15 members of his family over from India. He's won the Indian Derby, and yet he said winning that race at Ascot was the highlight of his career. So you can see
I
how
bet
that
he was just being nice to
well,
the
maybe,
British press,
but
right?
maybe,
but well
maybe.
done him.
Absolutely, yeah. But some of the riding, as you've pointed out in your piece, did raise question marks.
Yeah, so I think it is appropriate to make allowances. You know, if you put yourself in the position of these visiting jockeys, you can see how difficult it is. You're far away from home, surrounded by strangers. There might be a language barrier. You might be working in your second language or your third language. Unfamiliar horses, unfamiliar race course, new rules, new racing culture. As soon as you sort of bring some of these visiting jockeys over for an event like this, you can see why stuff would go wrong. And we've been at Shergar Cups in the past where stuff like that has happened.
Yeah.
You remember a trip to Paris, a hold-up horse, and he went steaming off in front and got stuffed. So, I mean, there's always been an element of that. The difference this year, I think, is that they changed the format with the unintended consequence, probably, that you've suddenly got, like a large majority of visiting jockeys.
The format being the ladies' team went.
Yeah.
Well, the girls' team was the girls, like the ladies had to call it. The ladies' team went, and the team Asia came in.
Yes, it seems like a direct replacement.
Yeah.
And as I say, you used to have riders in the ladies' team who would be mostly British or Irish based. If you go back even just 2 years to the Shergar Cup we had then, the girls' team was Haley, Holly, Safi, Osborne. The British and Irish team would have been, again, familiar jockeys, Tom Marquand, Declan McDonough, Luke Morris, and even in the European team, Frankie Dettori, Olivier Pellier, Tori Hammer-Hansen. Yeah. So that's 9 jockeys out of a total of 12 who are completely familiar with Ascot and riding in Britain. And you could be a trainer or an owner entering your horse for a Shergar Cup race that year in total confidence. That you're probably going to get someone for whom the novelty is just not a factor at all. And if bad luck, you get someone who is completely new to the place, well, still you might get someone who's got a bit of star quality and who performs really well. So this Shergar Cup on Saturday, because you've got Team Asia being introduced, the only 2 jockeys who are regulars in Britain or Ireland were Joanna Mason and Holly Doyle. A guy like Hugh Bowman, he'd be completely fine anyway. I think.
And he's ridden in Britain before plenty.
Yeah, he'd won Ascot umpteen years ago. Carys Teeton, I was sure was going to be fine, and he was fine. Yeah. But you've still got a lot of newbies who are sort of figuring it out as they go along, and you've only got 5 rides in the day. And there was weird stuff happening, like somebody took the blindfold off too late in the first race. I think he didn't realise that the stalls handler wasn't going to take it off for him. That would be what normally happens in his culture.
Which was surprising, because people like George Baker and Michael Hills were talking to the jockeys beforehand,
briefing them, right?
Yeah, as did the stewards. And one of the things that George Baker said to me was that 2 of the things they'd been clearest in talking to the jockeys about was whip limitations,
right, of course,
and procedures at the start, because in some jurisdictions someone will take the hood off the horse for the jockey, and they couldn't do that here. They don't do that here.
Well, for whatever reason, that message didn't get across for at least one guy, and then there was someone else who whipped it off too soon, and the horse crashed against the stalls before they opened, and he missed the kick as well. So I think basically in that first race, which was 10 runners, 3 of them missed the kick, and there was someone else who had a problem with a blind later on, and every race on the round course seemed to be run at a funereal pace, and there were other issues as well. There was a bit of interference going on, and it's difficult, when you, as I say, for all those reasons I mentioned earlier, you can see why stuff goes wrong, and when you've got 10 newish jockeys out of 12, you're going to see more of that than I think you would in a normal Shergar Cup. So for the sake of the confidence of trainers and owners in the future, I think they might have to tweak that a bit.
So, to Lim, Chris is thinking that they need to look at the makeup of the jockeys next year. But maybe one factor though, in terms of who they get, in terms of domestic jockeys, they're clearly limited in the sense that there are races taking place at Haydock and Newmarket the same day that have black type races. So anyone's got a retainer might well be required there. The Phoenix Stakes card at the Curragh used to take place on the Sunday, is now on the Saturday, which makes it harder to get high profile Irish jockeys. And in terms of bringing in international talent, this is not the only international jockeys event that takes place in the calendar. There are quite a few, are all around the world these days. Saudi, Hong Kong, Japan, they're not a new thing. There's a potential for, there's likely to be a global jockeys league starting next year if organisers get that one off the ground. A lot of these events, maybe all these events, they pay the jockeys to take part. Whereas at the Shergar Cup, clearly you can win prize money, and good prize money too, and Hugh Bowman won a $3 grand prize for the silver saddle, but the jockeys are rewarded with business class flights and 4 nights at a 5-star hotel at Pennyhill Park, not too far from Ascot. Now clearly, for most people that'd be a wonderful thing. But if you're a mega box earning jockey, maybe it's not quite as attractive. So getting some of the top names who you would really want to sell a day like that, maybe it's not as easy as it used to be.
No, definitely not. I think, like you touched on there, the fact that there's a lot of big races, across Europe happening the same weekend. Obviously, we've seen in Ireland, in England, there was group action at Haydock as well, and there was Group 1 action in Germany as well. So a lot of these big named jockeys will have responsibilities elsewhere. Yeah. So, and you're kind of almost stuck because, for example, we had a team Great Britain and Ireland, you have a team Europe. You've got to place these jockeys in the right team to to make it work. So the Shergar Cup is good in the sense that it allows the opportunity for these these jockeys that we might not see on a regular basis come and make a name for themselves. But the problem is that once the Shergar Cup's over, we might not see them again riding in Britain.
Probably not.
It's not like we have a regular in the Shergar Cup. They usually try and mix it up and bring in a variety of different people. So it's an opportunity for them to kind of sell themselves, but at the same time, when you have big named people coming out like Maureen Haggas and saying what a lot of people probably will be thinking, then it will sort of stop trainers trying to reach out to these jockeys and ask them to ride their horses.
I mean, to some extent, I sort of feel you don't really want the biggest international names to. You wouldn't want to try and tempt them to the Shergar Cup because when they get so Joe Moreira would be a different case. I've seen him a couple of times at Shergar Cup, and he fully commits and gives it a great go. But I mean, guys like Ryan Moore and Frankie Dettori, who they've done a few Shergar Cups, but latterly when I've seen them involved in that, you can see that they're kind of wondering why they're there. These are a string of handicaps, and their main employers couldn't care less about the Shergar Cup. I think you want people who are going to throw themselves into the spirit of the event. Someone like Emma Jane Wilson, who's really going to interact with the crowd and give it a real good go on her horse. So anybody who sort of thinks this is a bit beneath me or kind of gives off that vibe is best left where they were.
There was a suggestion that the 2 Japanese riders on Saturday, that perhaps they didn't engage with the event in the way that
Okay.
Ascot
Well, I
was right.
don't-
They didn't. They
don't know
wanted
about
to
that.
leave the event early on Thursday. They didn't turn up for the ITV opener on Saturday.
Right.
I know that created some disappointment internally. So you're right. You've got to get people, I suppose, who have a high enough standard. That trainers will have confidence in them, and the public will want to go and see them. But also people who really will want to participate in the event. Because it's a fun event, and if you don't really want to be part of the fun, there ain't no point being there.
And I mean, you know, we've got to not pretend in the media that what you're seeing here is a showcase of the very best jockeys from around the world. It's not going to be like that, because those guys, are, for the most part, aren't going to be tempted by 4 nights in a very smart hotel and the chance of a winner at Ascot. You know, they're probably there at the Royal Meeting anyway. So no, it's a fun thing, and but you're going to see, you know, some instances of riding, you know, maybe a little bit below the standard you would normally expect. That's there every year. That's just one of the risks of the Shergar Cup. It's, you know, it's a bit like when you're watching racing at Goodwood. You know, there's a big chance of getting in trouble and running, and at the Shergar Cup, you know, stuff happens that you wouldn't normally see. That's just the way it goes. But you do need to sort of keep that in check, you know, by also having you know, a reasonably high percentage of local jockeys who know what they're doing. You know, there's a balance to be struck.
Do you know who is a good jockey, Liam? Definitely a good jockey. Billy Loughnane. So's Oisin Murphy. They both won Group 1s yesterday. Billy Loughnane on Rebels Romance, his first Group 1 on Rebels Romance. For him, it definitely wasn't the first Group 1 in Germany. Sagir was a surprisingly impressive winner of the Prix Maurice de Geest. For Oisin Murphy and Andre Fabre. And on Saturday, Group 1 glory for Amo. First time in a while they've had that. Power Blue in the Phoenix Stakes. So away from the Shergar Cup, loads of Group 1s taking place.
Absolutely, and you know, plenty for everyone to get the teeth stuck into. Amo, I think they really needed that that top level win. I think it was the first time since King of Steel won on Champions Day in 2023 that they've got hold of that Group 1. So very important for them and the direction that they're going in. You know, it's been well documented that the money that they've spent and things haven't gone probably like they will have wanted, but at the same time, you know, they've been hitting the crossbar for a few times, and it was great to see them, you know, get that big race win, and it could be a huge sort of few weeks for the operation, with York around the corner. They've got the anti-post favourite in the Nunthorpe.
Yeah, Arizona Blue.
Yeah, and I think they've got a few other chances. Obviously, we've seen Flowerhead at the Royal Meeting, really well performed, and at Goodwood as well. So you'd think, hopefully for them now, that once they've got that one, they can sort of continue sort of going in the right direction.
Chris, is there one of those Group 1 performances on the weekend that particularly struck you?
Well, I enjoyed Rebels Romance, but
how could you not?
Yeah, exactly that. You know, he's such a grand old stager. You know, it's a pity he can't get into the Arc. I'd love to see him have a go at that race.
Ditto.
I thought it was kind of sad what happened to him in the King George. You know, a small field, and he got trapped behind the two Coolmore front runners, and with the filly on his outside, and he never got a run. And you know, he having run so well last year, and I quite fancied him to win that race. I'm talking through my pocket as usual, right? But yeah, it was gutting to see you know, horse of his standing get no chance at all at that, and you know, so there was some justice in him getting a Group 1 win in Germany at the weekend, and good for Billy Loughnane. Tough on William Buick, who would have been on him, but went to Deauville for a non-runner. There you go.
There you go indeed. That was part 1 of the front page. When we will return, it will be fixture-less chat, and I promise you it will be interesting. Welcome back to the front page with me, Lee Mottershead, Chris Cook and Liam Head. We're going to look now at last week's unveiling of the British fixture list for 2026. In a nutshell, almost the same number of fixtures taking place next year, programmed anyway, as there were this year. 1,458 fixtures are due to take place in 2026, 2 more, also 2 down on 2025. We'd already reported that the number of Premier race days is being slashed to 52 from 162. Protected window goes. In terms of real new news, it's about money that's being pumped into the sport in a bid to ensure that we have more horses taking part in the sport, and particularly more high quality horses taking part in Britain's best races, because we're well aware that there has been this equine talent drain in recent years. There has been, or there will be, a significant uplift in the 4 major midsummer Group 1 races, the King George, the July Cup, the International and the Sussex Stakes. There'll be a rise, a significant rise to minimum values for Class 1, so Group 1 listed races in Britain, and a significant as well pumping in of money to developmental races on the flat and over jump, so novice races and maiden races, again as a bid to make the sport more attractive to owners of quality horses. And Liam, one point I made in the column today is that there's often a perception that British racing's prize money relative to France and Ireland is mediocre, when the stats just don't bear that out. Particularly the top level, our major races over jumps and on the flat compare very favourably indeed to those jurisdictions. Where we have suffered is in developmental races, so maiden races, novice races. This will correct that, and part of a wider effort to reward the better horses. The thinking being that it's the top of any sport that is sold to potential fans. Are you in broad agreement or broad opposition?
No, in agreement. I think these maiden races, novice races, it's where we first get a glimpse of these promising horses on the track for the first time. So it's important that their sort of progression to the top is rewarded. We all know that prize money has been a real problem in the sport for a number of years, and while it is great to see the bigger races getting bigger in terms of prize money, I think valuing the lesser races is a lot more important for the future of the sport.
When you say lesser races, which races?
Like the developmental races. Obviously the prize money in a lot of these Group 1 races are very good anyway, but in comparison to ones around the world that they're not. But the fact that the sport is going to be investing a lot more. You mentioned the King George. I spoke to Nick Smith there, but a few weeks ago, on the day of the King George, and he was saying it was a statement of intent from the sport, and they're hoping to attract more runners from all over the world to put racing on the global scene. So, but going back to what I was saying, these races, the developmental races, the maidens and novices, this is the first opportunity we get to see some of these horses. So, seeing them for the first time and rewarding, connections for going for these races is crucial for what happens later on in their careers.
Chris, did you like what you read in the fixture list announcement?
It reminded me of when we have these blooming fixture list announcements every year. The major stumbling block is that the BHA is not actually free to make the decisions it wants to make, because the intervention of the Office of Fair Trading now 22 years ago, it means that we don't have central control of fixtures anymore. The racecourses have ownership of about 85% of the fixtures. So if it's decided centrally, or indeed across the sport, that we've got too much racing and we need to contract the fixture list a bit and hopefully bump up field sizes, they just can't do anything about it, because there's going to be no agreement on who's going to bear the pain. So I even sometimes find myself wondering if there's any way to revisit that intervention by the OFT, if it would be possible to go back to them and say, well, look, we have tried, we made an honest effort for 20 years to try and make this work, but here we are in a really difficult situation where our sport needs to make some difficult decisions, and you've hamstrung us. We can't do it.
Well, of course, that was at the heart of racecourse concerns in relation to Charles Allen as incoming chair. So a lot of the negotiations were about, well, a lot of the fear within racecourses was that if Allen wants the BHA to be a more commercial beast, as the BHA has nothing to be commercial with, really, apart from its operation in the fixtures, in which it is quite impotent, would the BHA under his control want to revisit the racecourse ownership of racecourse fixtures? And I think it's only because racecourses seem to have been reassured that that won't happen that we've maybe reached this point where Charles Allen will be the incoming chair of the BHA.
It's all very well, but he may have painted himself into a corner. If he's already given up on that particular debate, then there's so much less room for manoeuvre in the future. Anyway, so it's two fewer fixtures than last year, which is next to nothing, and I think the final total is only something like 3% lower than the record number of fixtures ever, which, when you consider how long we've been talking about too much racing, it's absolutely bizarre that we haven't been able to make any progress in that direction.
It is, but again, I suppose part of the problem too is that the way the sports funding model works, it's funded based around race fixture generation, isn't it? No fixture loses money, and they all put money into
so we're told.
So we're told, and that being the case, I suppose the BHA is quite reluctant.
But then there's this other dynamic, isn't there, that when you have so many fixtures, the field size goes down, and that in itself reduces your income from
absolutely
in all sorts of different ways. Look, if you had a guy like Charles Allen at the centre who was empowered to make that decision, I'm pretty sure he could build quite a broad consensus in favour of cutting back on the number of fixtures, but he just can't do it, and therefore it sort of feels like the whole of the rest of the debate around fixtures is just kind of working around this central disability.
But at some point, guys, there will have to be a change, surely, not least because there are going to be fewer horses. It's been well documented by the TBA and elsewhere that the foal crop in Britain and Ireland is going down, and it's potentially going to go down at a pretty alarming rate in the relatively near future. So how can you service a fixture list that is already troubled by inadequate field sizes if those fields are set to get much smaller in the future if we maintain the same number of fixtures, because we're going to lose 10, 20, 30% of the available horse population to run in those races?
I think it's kind of like we're trying to take it as far as we can before something major happens. You're waiting for the wheels almost to then think, right, we need to do something right now. I mean, 2 fixtures lost from 2025 to 2026. What is that in the grand scheme of things? It's absolutely nothing. I mean, you'd hardly realise it. I mean, you go back to what you were saying there, Chris, about we're not far off the record of fixtures we've had it in a year, and you could ask sort of trainers, stable staff even, who are having to make these trips to halfway across the country on a Sunday, for example. For it's like when we tried the Sunday evening race, and it went down like a lead balloon, didn't it? Like it was just bonkers. And I think that we have breaks in the season. I know we've just come back from a 2-week jumps break as well, but there just seems to be too much of it at the minute. I mean, all well and good is the fact that we are seeing more money getting pumped into the sport, into these races. The Group 1 and Grade 1 races are getting stronger in terms of prize money, but if you can't fill them, then you don't want to see 3-4 runner races, do you? In anything.
Yeah. But and I hear what you're saying about the declining horse population, sort of forcing us into a situation where a decision seems necessary. But if nobody's empowered to make that decision, I can just imagine the sport trying to struggle along without changing anything seriously.
Well, maybe a fully independent BHA board under a strong BHA chair might be able to do something.
They're going to definitely come up with suggestions, right? But if they can't force it through, then why should any individual racecourse or racecourse group agree to take the pain if they don't see that it's also being borne by everyone else?
Something else that Charles Allen will no doubt be looking at when he starts in the role in September is the threat, the government's plans to harmonise gambling tax rates. Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister, former Chancellor of the Exchequer, entered the debate last week. Did you just praise see what he was saying?
Well, he had a big article in The Guardian, it's still online, you can go and read it, mainly focused on his great concern about child poverty, which he says has grown terribly in this country over the last 15 years. And he being a very principled and engaged politician, clearly that bothers him. He wants to do something about it. That part of the article, no one clearly could have any argument with. But then he moves on to saying, since we have to come up with some funds to tackle this issue, let's tax the gambling industry. Yeah. He says it's undertaxed. He compares it with tax rates in other jurisdictions, including some in America, where he says tax rates are much higher. We still saw a response from the Betting and Gaming Council at the end of the week saying, all the reasons why they disagree with what he said, and fundamentally, if tax rates go up, punters will suffer. I would guess there's a lot of people out there who are sort of wondering, well, why does it have to be the betting industry that pays for what you need to do to help kids get out of poverty? So the response from a politician would be, that's where we think the money is. And I was pleased to see him sort of acknowledge the need for some kind of carve out for horse racing, but I think he was talking in that article about a sum of money to compensate the sport for the loss of income from gambling. I mean, that's just not going to adequately fill the hole that will be created.
But it seems as though Gordon Brown is proposing the same thing as the Social Market Foundation think tank, whereby, and this is really interesting,
he linked
working on for one, whereby those people who we might have classed before as, maybe still do, as anti-gambling campaigners, are trying to forge relationships with racing. We've already seen positive words from the NTF about this plan, whereby they're saying don't harmonise tax rates, don't make racing the same as gaming, as slots, or casino. Actually, what you should do is you should whack up the rate for gaming, and you should bring down the rate for horse racing. And the Social Market Foundation and Gordon Brown proposing that you actually increase, if you like, the levy rate from 10% to 20%, and you reduce the tax rate, if you like, for racing from 15% to 5%. And of course, you've then got that question of, okay, well, that sounds great, but would it actually work, in the sense that will you just end up for racing with a bigger slice of a smaller cake, because bookmakers react anyway, because they say, well, if our profits have been hit across the board, we're just not going to ignore racing. We're going to have to take issues with racing.
I mean, it does feel like gambling is under sustained assault and has been for a number of years, and it seems nearly inevitable to me that is going to have negative consequences for horse racing, given that so much of the sports income comes from betting. I'm pleased to see people acknowledging the need to do something to support the sport if that money is in decline. But I can't see that it's going to be enough to plug whatever hole is created.
No. Liam, what's your week got in store?
I'm at Newbury.
So am I, actually.
Yes, Newbury Friday and Saturday.
Yes, Hungerford Stakes, Geoffrey Freer Stakes Day.
Yeah, so looking forward to that, and some more warm weather.
Yeah, it's going to get hot.
Yeah.
I'm a bit worried, I've got to say, for the early season novice chases. At some stage there's got to be some rain, right? But none on the horizon. Am I the only one who wants summer to end quickly?
A measure of the man that Chris Cook is, that as we approach another heat wave, his primary concern is those early season novice chases.
Well, and also the people of Scottish extraction who are going to suffer in this terrible heat in England that they're just not born for.
Yes. Well, let's pray for Mr. Cook. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Lee.
Pleasure.
Thank you for watching. We shall return next week, when there will no doubt be much discussion about the Ebor Festival that will follow, starting a week on Wednesday. Until then, have a great week. See you soon. Bye-bye.